Perfect. First slide's up.
All right.
Great. Okay, then let me introduce you real quick. Although I'm probably a poor introducer, but I will let you, of course, introduce yourself as well. This is Daniel Hayes, and this will be his webinar in the Sleep series. Daniel's at home in innovation, entrepreneurship, startups, social business, sustainability, and the digital world. And in his function as this ever-renewing and very versatile entrepreneur and activist, he has started up numerous projects. I just want to point out one, which is Make Sense, which is an online matching platform for social entrepreneurs whose businesses also aim at making sense and not only making money. He's also an author of the book Phase Zero, How to Make Some Action. He is now based in Barcelona, where he works to connect the social entrepreneurs and the activists in the MENA region around the Mediterranean. And I will hand over to you, Daniel, because you can probably describe best what you're doing right now. And
Great.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Yeah? Everyone good? Can you hear me well? Can you see me well? And can you see the slides well? Yes? Excellent. Yeah, well, thank you very much for this introduction. I thought I would kind of keep the whole personal stuff a little bit for the end and kind of jump right into the topic that I want to talk about with you. So when I was talking to Adrian before, we were thinking about what kind of topic could I cover that really adds some value. So as soon as you really, like, it's a very interactive webinar. So as soon as you have a question or that you, you know, like feel like that you already know it, you can kind of put like this. If you have a question, I don't know, there's maybe something in this program where you can signal that you have a question, or you can like wave or yell or make yourself noted somehow. I'm happy to kind of address things like right away as they arise, and if the thing will be a bit like addressed later, or we'll have a longer discussion, then I'll just ask us to, or ask you to wait with the question until later. Well, I forgot again the title with which I was introduced this webinar, but my internal title that I gave it is just going to be Design Thinking for Change. So as far as I understand, all of you are in projects or working on projects that have some kind of aspect of improving the world, and also some kind of aspect of organization, of kind of innovation as well, and doing new things, thinking problems anew, and finding new solutions to existing problems. Correct me if I'm wrong, always. So I wanted to talk a little bit about design thinking for change with you today, and really just kind of walk you through the design thinking process. How many of you are familiar with design thinking? Can you give a show of hands? All right, 1, 2, great. That's really a good place to be. So then I can just kind of start from the beginning, and I'll try not to rush through it too much. Let's see if this works. No, it doesn't. Let me try that again. Okay, so I have the choice of either seeing my slides or you, or actually clicking through my slides or you. So you really have to shout if you have a question in between. I hope that's all right. Well, I usually start out kind of talking about design thinking to also talk about what design is not. And typically when people think about design thinking, they kind of think of these like designer chairs or designer furniture, and typically what it means is that it's really expensive and that it looks pretty. And this is actually a very small part of the design process. And when you would actually ask like a designer what design really is, you would probably get a whole different answer, because design is not only about how things look, but it's also a lot about how things work. And this is really kind of this basic understanding of design that I want to kind of promote a little bit today. And I kind of wanted to start this this discussion with a question or a problem that some design thinkers have thought about a couple of years ago in Stanford. And this is, first of all, a number, and I think this, here we go. These are the two numbers I wanted to bring to you today. And the first number, 15 million. 15 million is the numbers of babies that are born preterm. That means they were born before they were 37 weeks. They had 37 weeks to grow in the mother's womb. And this number is rising. It's not declining at the moment. And it's the leading cause of death among children under 5 years of age. 1 million children died in 2015 because they were simply born too early and they didn't have the proper medical care to take care of them. And this is really the biggest preventable cause of death, because a lot of these kids basically die of hypothermia, that they don't have enough warmth around them once they're born in this early stage. And what typically the solution looks like is this here. This is kind of where the name incubator really comes from. I'm not sure if you also kind of hear this a lot, but in my world, I'm always surrounded by incubators and accelerators and startups and things like that. This is kind of how the original incubator really looks like. And it's the Draga Isolette, I think C1000 or 2000 is this model. But the model number is not that important. What's actually important is that this thing costs $20,000. So it's a pretty interesting solution for industrial countries, for developed countries, for people who can afford to bring their kid to a hospital that is, or that has kind of this amount of care. But if we look at this number of the 1 million kids, most of the time, these kids don't really die in industrial countries, but you guessed it, they are much more prevalent in developing countries. So for these developing countries, there was a team in Stanford at the HPI School of Design Thinking, the Stanford School of Design Thinking, and they set out to change this. And the solution that they came up with, using kind of the methods of design thinking, looks like this. And what's great about this is that this only costs $25. And with this, in the first year, they actually already saved, I think, over 1,000 kids' lives. And then over the course of the last 3 or 4 years that they've been in existence, they've saved 50,000 lives in more than 11 countries. And it's really spread very, very far. And nowadays, it's called the Embrace infant warmer. You can look it up. They have a website. I think you can even order them online. And there's a ton of advantages that this has, of course, like compared to other incubators that you saw earlier that are $20,000. And the whole thing really comes from a team that heard about this whole problem of premature birth actually in that course. So the course in Stanford, I forgot the name right now, but it's about dealing with really the most difficult issues that we can face. And as this was such a difficult issue, the students hadn't really heard about it, but well, when they got the assignment, they really dug in and read pretty much everything that was there to read about the topic. And they learned that, well, Nepal is actually a country where this is a big, big issue. And well, one of the team members, he actually took took some dollars and went over there to Nepal to really understand, okay, what is the problem? And so when he was in Nepal, he discovered that actually in the hospital, the incubators were empty. And he was like, that was a big surprise for him, because the way he was thinking before was, well, these people are poor, the hospitals don't have the incubators, so obviously like the babies don't get the care that they need. But what he found was empty incubators in Nepal. And the reason for that, when he did further inquiries, was not only that the mothers or that the families didn't have enough money to get to the hospital. The problem was that a lot of times for rural people not living very close to the city, it was almost impossible to get to the hospital and stay there. So it was okay for the mother to come to the hospital and get the birth, or to come for a day or two, but to have a baby for 2 weeks in an intensive care in an incubator like this, that was almost impossible, because oftentimes the mothers had many other duties, other children, and they couldn't really leave that family behind. So a lot of times the center actually had these really expensive incubators, but then they couldn't really use them. And what design thinking does in one of its kind of core missions is putting the user at the center. I don't know if you've heard this term of human-centered design, but this is one of the human-centered design methods. I would probably argue one of the most interesting or important ones today. But what's really important is that we remember that we don't really put the kind of anything else at the center other than the user and the user needs. And so basically that's how they kind of started out thinking about the project. So they were looking at, okay, in what context do these mothers live, and what are the solutions that they would need, and what are their constraints, and how would life look like if I was a family or a mother actually in kind of rural Nepal, and what would my options be, and how does my decision environment look like? And then they designed for this decision environment. So they didn't really ask, how can we make a cheaper incubator? But they asked, how might we create a baby warming device that helps parents in remote villages give their dying infants a chance to survive? This was really their design question. And a lot of times, when you're talking about design thinking, you are trying to find a design question, design perspective. A lot of times, it's called a brief from designers, but that's really at the core of what design is, and it's there to solve a problem. And there's this lovely quote by Steve Jobs, who said, well, yes, some people think design means how it looks, but of course, if you dig deeper, it's really how it works. And I really agree with this notion. I really think this is the core function and the core element of design, is to be of a lot of value, of use, like being really functional for the user that you're trying to target. So design thinking is kind of a method then that was copied or taken from a philosophy of designers, because the way projects, and especially innovation projects, back then people called them R&D, research and development, were typically structured were a waterfall method. I'm sorry, there's a phone going off here in the office right now, and the office is empty, and I'm not going to pick up either, so I'm just going to continue talking to you. Can you hear me? Still all right? Great. So the old waterfall method was this kind of thing where you first have like your, identification of the problem. Then after that, you go into the next phase, like you brainstorm solutions. After you brainstorm solutions, you go into the next phase saying, developing solutions, prototyping, and then you're finished at some point. However, this kind of linear way of thinking about projects, I guess you're familiar with that, is a little bit outdated, because oftentimes this is how reality looks. So you plan for the straight line, but then in the end, a lot of the things that come across your way are just, really difficult parts that you probably couldn't have imagined before. So design thinking tries to deal with this by having a circular or a super loud. By having a circular philosophy of constantly iterating. So the idea is that you're never really finished, that you're constantly in beta, because you're never there where you want to be, but you're always in an improvement loop, in an improvement process. And the idea is that you just constantly try to get better. It's also kind of behind this whole philosophy of you know, fail early, fail often. Like this mantra is typically kind of said with this idea of, well, we always want to fail better. Like you're never going to be 100% perfect, but you just kind of don't want to repeat the old mistakes and keep on making new mistakes. For some people, making mistakes, or if you don't make mistakes, it's a very big indicator that you're actually not really trying anything new or anything innovative. So this is something that if you Google design thinking, you'll probably find something that looks very similar to this. And these are the stages of design thinking. But unlike a project that's managed in a waterfall kind of way, what you should kind of think about here is that all of these stages have a little loop going back to another stage, and it's not just that you go from left to right in one straight line, but a lot of times you will have to say that, well, here after I ideated, for example, after the fourth stage, like I just hit some roadblocks and I see that we didn't really do a good job in the third step, or we had a wrong assumption. So let's go back to defining the problem. And I wanted to spend the rest of the afternoon, evening with you to talk about these different stages and also bring in some examples of how I've been using this method for my projects. And if you have any questions, again, please feel free to jump in. So what I like about this this way of doing it or showing it is actually that you see like the two kind of diamonds here that I think are very like a core element of many human-centered design processes. And they show the difference between when you're turning into divergent thinking and convergent thinking. The difference between them is really with divergent, you're going like all out. You're trying to get all kinds of ideas. You're trying to get as many ideas as possible. It's really where you say quantity over quality. You need to find 1,000 shitty ideas to find like the one golden idea. Like this is where you kind of accumulate mass and really don't try to limit yourself. And the convergent part is the part where you say, okay, now we got to filter. Now we got to look at what are our goals, what are our constraints, and how many of these crazy ideas actually fit into the mold of what we want to do. And typically in a process of like going from starting out understanding the project to building your first prototype and testing it, you'll go through that process twice of going really wide and then kind of focusing back down. And we'll go through that a little bit in now. And for me, one thing that I wanted to show you, and I don't know why this picture was earlier in my deck, but this is how many people really think about design thinking, like that it's just a lot of Post-its. It's kind of a crazy process. People put Post-its on walls and on tables, like you can hardly see the table anymore. But this is really not everything, of course, of the design thinking process. And I think this is a bit of a dangerous understanding if we reduce design thinking to this, because this has a very valid part in the design thinking process, especially in the ideation process. But as you can see in this diagram, it doesn't start with ideate. That's step 4. Like we typically start with a phase of understanding. And I really like this quote. I agree very much with this as well. Like if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. And this is where we really get into kind of this way of thinking like a designer. Oftentimes a designer, to understand the problems, they will go into the field and live with the people. They will teach the people design methods. They will try to build up as much empathy as possible to really understand what is the situation of the user and what are their needs. So to do this understanding, there's a couple of tools that we have. And I think I'll go through some of these tools now with you. One thing I wanted to add, so design thinking and human-centered design is one approach. I always think about it as one tool in my toolbox to use. And so when I think about the ways that we can think about innovation and doing new stuff, we have three different ways or aspects of where we can start looking for interesting innovations. And on the one hand, that is the human side, and what is desirable, what do humans want, what do they need. There's a technology side, like what can we build, what's even physically possible. And then you have the business side of what makes sense from a financial standpoint. What can I kind of put into an organization that will have long-term viability because there's going to be customers and people will buy it. And for me, as someone who comes very strongly from this design thinking perspective, I would always come from the top, from this human values perspective. And this would be the first question that I would try to answer. There's no doubt for me that in the end, we have to end up in the center where it's red, and every solution that we have to find has to have a technological feasibility, it has to be viable as a business, and it has to be something that humans really love. But the philosophy here is really that we start with understanding humans. It comes back to this earlier mantra of user-centric design and focusing on the user problems. Like, I really believe if you can figure out a way to solve a problem for humans, the technology part and the business part is actually the lesser problem. And you can figure those out. And there is one caveat to this whole idea of human-centered design, and it comes out in this Henry Ford quote, who said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And this really highlights an aspect where that I really want to stress, and that is, if we want to understand people, it does not mean to do a survey. It does not mean to ask people, what do you want? Or it does not even mean to say, look, I have this wonderful solution for an app. It's going to be a cookbook and a, I don't know, a phone book all into one, and it's going to be amazing. Do you want to buy it? Like, I think that's laziness. Like, I really believe you as the designer should not be asking questions to your target audience about whether or not they like your idea. And I mean, by the way, the easiest way to get people to like your idea is just continue asking them until they get tired, and they'll tell you, yeah, your idea is wonderful, just like leave me alone now. But this quote really brings out something that I think is critical, and that is, do not try to understand or ask people what they think they want, but try to understand the needs of the people and then design on that. And one tool that we use for designing with the needs of people and to understanding those needs is a persona generation. Have you heard of a persona generation? So some yes, some no. So I'll spend a couple of sentences on that. So persona generation, for those of you who are a bit familiar maybe with marketing segmentation, persona generation is kind of like marketing segmentation on crack. It's like really that going to the extreme where you don't only say, well, I'm targeting females that live in the city that are between 25 and 35 and that have a high school and college diploma. Like, we go much, much deeper here when we do a persona, and we actually give the person a name. We give the person a place where they were born, a place where they grew up. We give them a real job or a real school. We give them some hobbies. Like, we really start being creative about these personas. And the idea is not necessarily that we just want to design a solution for James, but that the more specific we are with thinking about who are we designing for, the better we can find solutions that are appropriate. And most likely those solutions will also fit Stephen or Henry or whoever is in a similar boat and has similar needs than James. So persona generation typically starts after kind of your understanding kind of the problem and understanding like really what is out there and what is the kind of the pain of the user. And it usually starts with a wild guess. So you kind of start out with having, well, like your stereotypical thoughts. Like a lot of times when you work in groups making personas, the first ones are typically pretty funny because you really like put your all your stereotypes into building these characters, going from like the first ones. And this is a really helpful thing because we want to vocalize all these hidden thoughts in some ways that we have so that they're on the table, and then we can go further and look into, can we verify them? Are some of them actually true? Are some of them not true? How does the actual user that we have compare or stack up against these images that we had previously in our head? And as you go around and learn more and more about these people or about like your potential target group, you will be able to adjust. And it's the same philosophy as most things in design thinking. There's an iterative model. So you'll have, you know, persona Henry 1.0, Henry 2.0, and Henry 3.0. As you go around, they're going to be more and more rich, more and more close to the actual target that you're looking at, and more helpful for you and thinking about different solutions. One thing we do with personas is that we make an empathy map. So empathy is a very important word in the whole design thinking community, because we really want to feel how it is to live a day in the shoes of our audience. And so the left side here of this empathy map are things that we can kind of observe. And on the right side, we have things that we need to infer a bit. So we need to, like, and this is where it's less of a science and a little bit more of an art, to kind of go from the left side to the right side to infer things from what people say and what they do to what this probably means to what they think and what they feel. But this is really kind of where we want to be in terms of understanding the person and kind of their thoughts in the process and kind of their needs. And then once we have that, what we want to do is really create a point of view. And a point of view is, here. This is a sample sentence for a point of view. I like it a lot. I use this one. And it basically, it's similar to some of these sentences that you can find in marketing, but you have obviously in the beginning the user, that's where your persona comes really in. And then what does your user need to do and why do they need to do that? So you really are trying to looking for things that the user is trying to accomplish, especially in verb form. Like you really want to focus on what, you know, is the action that's supposed to happen, and what is the insight that you have? What is some unique insight that you have about this target group, and how does that fit into your point of view in terms of what they need or what are they trying to accomplish, what action? And then from there on, you kind of make a question. I call them the how might we questions, and this is really where I start with thinking about my design framework of, okay, these are the type of questions that I really need to answer. And to make this a little bit more tangible, so this is a guy that I actually work with. I had the fortune to meet him last year, but he was already a little bit on my mind as a persona. And as I met him, the persona got richer and richer. And this is Nabil. Nabil Tarazi lives in Jordan, and Nabil runs this eco lodge. This is the Feynan Eco Lodge. It's about 4 hours outside of Amman. And as you can see, there's solar panels on the roofs. These solar panels power the whole thing. It's an eco-friendly lodge. So you can go there and really live among the Bedouins. You can get a lot of kind of experience with the local villagers and have kind of an ecotourism experience. And when I met Nabil, we talked about how that he has a big problem with kind of, you know, private clients, because private clients, a lot of times they would come one time, they wouldn't really bring any recurring revenue. And right now, tourism in Jordan anyway is very difficult because of the kind of conflicts in the regions. Most people have this prejudice that, well, I don't really want to go there, it's dangerous. And so tourism is down by like 70 or 80% right now in Jordan. So Nabil has like quite a few challenges right now. And like as I was talking to him and interviewing him and understanding more and more about this problem, I kind of created this POV, and this is, well, Nabil needs to connect with and sell to business clients, because evangelizing private people is difficult and doesn't create recurring revenues. And this kind of not only came from a conversation that I had with Nabil, but also a conversation that I had with a corporate or a large corporation who I met at an event, who was actually there to support interesting green initiatives, but they never really thought about not only giving them their CSR money, but actually doing their next retreat, for example, when they have a retreat of their management board, instead of going to a 5-star hotel, to go to Nabil's kind of eco lodge and doing it there. And so these conversations that kind of came out through this triggered me to discuss with Nabil, what about thinking about business clients? And then he was like, yes, this would actually be really an interesting proposition, because he would have recurring business most likely with these clients, and they wouldn't just come once, but come more often. So this is why we created this kind of point of view, which turned into this how might we. So in the beginning, you know, my task right now is to think about how can I help people like Nabil, and I'm thinking, well, you know, like a lot of times it's the funding, or they don't have access to funding, and we need to figure out how can we bring them more together with investors. But actually then what we found out with Nabil was that he's fine with investments, but that this business side of things, this was really the biggest challenge. So the way I adjusted my design lens now in this process is that my how might we questions of thinking about solutions are really now about the effective introductions to purchasing departments of multinational businesses. And the important part is that we're not talking about the CSR departments, that we're really talking about purchasing. So like really a different type of people that we want to talk to. And then also, how can we help people like Nabil prepare to sell to these multinational businesses? Because oftentimes they might not know, how does the purchasing process work? How does the PO work? What are the delivery times? What are the requirements that you need to do business with a big multinational? And those kinds of things. So this is really what's informing my work right now. This is kind of the question that I have hanging over my monitor to think about. What can we do to support people like Nabil? Very briefly, this is where I work at the moment. It's called the Regional Activity Center for Sustainable Consumption and Production. And because it has such a nice and short, easy name, you probably already guessed that it must have something to do with the institution. So it's a UNEP office. That's why this name is so very long. And what we are doing is supporting green entrepreneurs in the Mediterranean. But back to the design thinking part. So right now, we've kind of gone through the first 3 steps. We've gone through understand, and then observe, and then define. And define is really kind of where we are right now with the how might we question. And from the how might we question, we go into the ideation part. And for the ideation part, there are many different ways that you can kind of boost your creativity, that you can do these kind of workshops for ideation. You've seen earlier my photo with people doing all of these like post-its everywhere. And for example, Adrian talked earlier about Make Sense. It's an organization where we gather people around to do design thinking for problems of social entrepreneurs. And that was actually a photo from one of the Make Sense sessions. So this is really how we work, and it's really an aspect of what we do. And we use a lot of post-its, and we do it because we believe that it improves brainstorming. I don't know how many of you have this, like, know this situation, but a lot of times when I'm sitting in brainstormings, I have ideas while someone else is talking. And my brain can only do one thing: either listen to that person or actually remember my thought to still know what I want to say when it's my turn to speak. So what we do is we use these Post-its to actually write down whatever idea we have, whatever we need to then later take a look and remember, and then we participate further in listening to the brainstorming part. Because otherwise, if the brainstorming would just be me not listening to other people and me just writing down my ideas, well, there's a much more efficient way of doing that, and that's just separating out into different rooms. Everyone takes 5 or 10 minutes to think for themselves about what ideas they have, and then you all come together and share. But the value of having everyone together at the same time is really to start building on each other's ideas, to like improve your idea through kind of listening to what other people are saying or what kind of feedback they have. So that's why we use these a lot. So I already covered 2 parts. The brainstorming with Post-its, the kind of silent brainstorming. If you go online and you Google creativity techniques or brainstorming techniques, you'll find a lot of different ones. And you'll have to try out, I think, a lot with what works best for you and what works best in the given situation. But what we find that is very helpful is, on the one hand, a guided brainstorming, where we really have a moderator that doesn't participate in actually creating ideas, but is really just there to guide people through the process and bring the energy and kind of this level of excitement that you want to have in the brainstorming. Some rules that we have for our brainstormings are that we say, okay, first of all, it's quantity, not quality. We really want as many ideas as possible. The second rule is that you don't own the idea. For example, if you say school and someone else is like, it inspires them to say a school bathroom, or they say the chalkboard, or they say teacher, you know, like that's totally fine. You don't own any, you know, like you don't own all the words that have to do with school, but you're trying to provide something, a ladder for someone else to go and build on top of that. And so this is what we really try to encourage. We try to steal ideas from other people and then build on top of them, at least in the framework of the brainstorming. And then what we also say to people is, give us your wild ideas, because oftentimes when we come in, the easy ideas have already been tried out by the entrepreneur. And a lot of times, this is the same case when you're trying to do innovation and trying to come up with new solutions. A lot of times it's just the case that the easy stuff, the obvious stuff has already been tried out, or someone else already had it. So we're really trying to go for these wild ideas and trying to get people to lower their filters, those kinds of filters that you put on what you say, because you're thinking of how smart does it make me look, or how stupid or how embarrassing is it, or what will people think about me. Like the first probably 5 minutes of every brainstorming I really spend with kind of questions that like reduce this inhibition, and also that I, as the moderator, would kind of signal that it's completely okay to give absolutely nonsensical, stupid, funny, whatever answers. We just want to, you know, get everyone talking and everyone kind of in this mode of being there, like contributing with answers, whatever comes to their mind. Anything else that I wanted to say on creativity techniques? Well, I believe like creativity is really something that is not necessarily something that you're born with, but that you can absolutely learn. That however you think about yourselves as a creative person, there are like a ton of different exercises, but in the end, I believe creativity comes from really just like being creative and being in creative processes, and that could be anything for you. One little exercise that I like to do is, I'm not sure, I've never tried it online. I always do it online at conferences, but let's maybe try it online. So, do you all want to turn on your microphone? I hope you guys are alone in the room, or at least like whoever else is in the room is listening to my instructions, so you won't, you know, come across completely crazy. But the exercise is super simple. And we take about 60 seconds. And what we're going to do is point at something in the room, like whatever. You can also point at the screen and at me. And when you point at something, like you say a name or you say a word. However, the only word you're not allowed to say is the name of the thing you're pointing at. So if I would be doing like this, I could say anything in the world except for webcam. I can say calendar, I can say bottle, I can say January, I can say blue. I just cannot say webcam. Yeah? So when I say start, I'm going to give you 60 seconds of doing this, just randomly pointing around the room and naming things not by their real name. So 3, 2, 1, let's go.
Mac.
Christmas.
Cupboard.
Window. We have
Lord. Page.
coffee. We have a
Smartphone.
we have a rock star.
And rocket.
Round.
Box.
Cloud.
Shoes.
Plastic.
Box.
Open.
Yeah.
Key. Floor. Ceiling. Black.
Phone.
I don't know. Bingo.
Cool.
Yeah,
Well, this was the first round. Thank you very much. Congrats. There are two things that usually come with this exercise. So I assume you guys are all really smart people. So one thing that smart people tend to do is as soon as I announce this exercise, they are going to already know the first 3 to 5 things that they're going to say. They're going to start stacking. How many of you were stacking actually? Oh, wow, not everyone. Okay, but a lot of you. So where we want to get to is really to a state where we don't stack. The second strategy that a lot of smart people do is they just start going through patterns. They'll go through red, blue, green, yellow. They'll go through different animals. They'll go through, you know, like a different group of words. And this is also kind of where we want to try to go away from when we're doing this exercise. After all, nobody's grading us on this exercise. We're just doing it for ourselves to improve our creativity. So this is a little exercise that I like to do actually at airports because I travel a lot, but you can really literally do it everywhere. You don't have to call out things, or you don't have to overtly stand in the airport and point at things and call them things. But you can do it kind of in your head by looking around, at different things and then just saying something to yourself and calling them something. And this is, I think, a really useful creativity exercise to start thinking about how can you reduce these kinds of filters about what you're going to say and not feeling, ashamed about saying like the first thing that really comes to your mind. Any more questions on creativity? Well,
I was just gonna give you a short cue into time. We're about half an hour away from the end.
Yes.
So if you want to take questions in the end, you have to also allocate some time there. Thank you.
Yeah. We're almost done, actually. So the rest is really easy. The rest is just like super simple. No, it's not actually. This is really where I think a lot of times design thinking people can get lost in the ideation part and sometimes should go quicker into the next phases that I think are, again, very important. So because if you remember this here, so like with the ideation part, we're again in this divergent part where creating a lot of ideas, quantity over quality, like we're really trying to amass things. And then what we're trying to do in the next step is to evaluate them. And the way typically we evaluate things is by prototyping. And prototyping can take a number of different ways. It really depends what solutions you're trying to do and what kind of what your problem is. So if you're trying to rethink a service, if you're doing service design, then it might not necessarily be that you're building things with Lego. It might be that you have a flow chart. However, maybe you do need something with Lego because you will be able to kind of like take pictures of different stages of the service process and use this as your prototype. However, typically, like all these things like Lego and clay and these physical building things will a lot of times be more for innovations where you're looking around product innovation. They can be used for a variety of things though. And yeah, I guess this is also something that people kind of think about or have in mind when they're thinking about this design thinking is like there's typically a room full of stuff to play with. So not only Lego, actually I don't have any more pictures with me, but a lot of times a room for design thinking or there will be at least one room in the building that will have all kinds of materials like paper, clay, like all kinds of tools and scissors and like metal wires and anything that you can do to quickly, easily build stuff. And the thing is that for us in design thinking, it's really important to actually build things and have a physicality to things. Because what we wanted to do, if you remember in the beginning what I said about we don't want to ask people about their opinion of our solution. What we want to do is we want to give them a manifestation of that solution. We want to ideally give them something into their hands that they can try out, that they can play with, and then they can kind of give feedback with. So in this case, like the users would probably get the whole piece of Lego and probably be kind of instructed through, okay, what happens when they do this, or what happens when they do this. Can also be kind of like done by this paper wire framing. It's, you know, like really the cheapest way to build an app, and it's basically to just draw all of your screens, and then you go from well, if someone clicks here, you go to that next screen. And if someone clicks on that button, you go to that next screen. Like what I typically advise people to do is not to make it on one sheet of paper, but have like many different little sheets of papers, and then like give people the whole stack. And once they try to click on something, you manually kind of go and like show them the next screen so that they're really getting a feeling or a sensation of interacting with someone. Because a lot of times when you buy something in the store, like there's not going to be someone like next to you and explaining you each and every detail of how something works. What we're trying to do is build things that work because they're actually very useful to people and they're solving a problem and they understand how to use it. There's probably nothing worse in my mind than, you know, like an instruction manual that is more than 20 pages. Like, I don't know, I've never really, I think, read any instruction manuals in my life. I usually kind of just push buttons until things work. And so we're trying to design for these kinds of users most of the time. And what we're trying to do when we're prototyping, we're trying to get valuable feedback on what people like and what people don't like and what people don't understand. Actually, the understanding part is almost more important than the liking part. And this is, for example, also why this paper wireframing, I think, is a really great tool, because nobody will tell you, I don't really like the shade of green of this button. Or, you know, like this like top column should maybe be like 5 pixels wider. This is not really the information that we're looking at right now. Like, again, we're not looking to make it pretty at this stage. We're looking to make it functional. So when you give someone a paper wireframe like this, a lot of times their comments, they will focus really on the useful feedback for you, which is kind of how does it work? And this is kind of the end. And I just kind of had some slides here as a reminder. Design thinking fits very well also with a philosophy of lean startup design or lean startup thinking. This is one of the core elements of lean startup thinking as well. Now here you can see the circular and iterative element is really emphasized. And it kind of starts with, there's 3 processes that you can be in a lean development phase, and it's either you're building something, and then you have a product, and then you measure kind of how it's doing, how users are interacting with it, and from this data, you kind of learn and you create new ideas. Probably one thing that a lot of kind of people who come more from the design thinking side would say is the top the top bubble or the bubble that we start with should not necessarily be built, but it should really be learned. That we really shouldn't build things if we don't have any clue of what the problem actually is. And that a lot of times the interesting or important part about this methodology is not only how we build things, but really how we're thinking of ourselves as designers who immerse themselves to create empathy with the final user. And yeah, this is kind of how we look at, this is kind of the whole process, really. And I have a couple of examples with me to finish off the presentation, and otherwise I can kind of break for questions. But to me, design thinking, I think, is really important nowadays, because a lot of times, like, the organizations that we work for and we work with are kind of looking like this. Kind of very hierarchical and like kind of top down. And I really believe that the future jobs or the future value that we can provide in organizations is that we can think laterally, and that we can kind of work also laterally, and that someone who is at the bottom left somewhere of the corner can exchange ideas with someone on the bottom right, and they can break out of the silos that we've created to look at problems holistically. Because any problem that you have, like if you talk to someone from different departments in a company, most likely they will have different answers. So most likely, I don't know, let's even say like your product sales are not going so well. You designed a new car and it's not really working so well. You know, every one of your departments will probably have a different analysis of that. Like your sales people are probably going to look at, well, you know, like what can we do to improve, shit, sorry, let me just cancel that call real quick. So where was I? Right, the car sales are not going well. So the salesperson will probably say, you know what? I need a bigger and better car. So when I go to some client, I will have much more, like be demonstrating more value, and that will impress them much more. So it will, you know, like get them to buy more. Your technology people might say, well, we just need to make better products, and then they're going to sell more. The marketing people are going to say, we need to, you know, like do more advertising and more communication. We need more budget for this. So I think most problems today, you can really look at it from so many different angles, and the truth somewhere lies in between. And the way we kind of build groups that are actually doing the design thinking is typically in a way that is very multidisciplinary. And that, on the one hand, makes it more difficult in the beginning to find a common language, but going through that exercise is really helpful when you're actually then further along in the project, and you really can build off of many different viewpoints from people who just have different lenses on when they're like together with you in a group. Some examples of what design thinking did other than make incubators. There's this fairly famous example of Keep the Change. Bank of America was thinking about, like, we need to open more accounts, and people are not really coming to us, and pretty much all bank accounts are the same. And anyway, people change their banks maybe once or twice in their life on average. And yeah, we want really people to, when they make that decision, to be there. And what they developed is a program. They kind of looked at, like, they had one user, I think, that kind of did this automatically, that every time that she bought something, every time she bought something for $3.79, she would take the rest of the 21 cents and put it into a separate savings account. And she would always kind of like round up that number. And at the end of the year, she had quite a sizable amount of money left over, and she didn't really feel that pain of putting it into the savings account. And they called her, I think, actually. and they kind of did interviews with her and really understood kind of how she worked and built a persona around her. And then they went out and looked at, well, does this actually also, is this something that other people are also interested in, or does it fulfill a need for other people as well? So it did in the end. And what they created then was a checking account that actually does exactly what the old lady did manually, automatically. So each time you're buying something somewhere in a store and it's like $1.98, you'll put 2 cents in your checking account or your savings account actually. And this happened after 1 year. There was $3 billion in savings, and 2.5 million customers created like these savings. And 700,000 new accounts were opened in the first year. So it was a massive success for the bank, and it was, I think, in that kind of like saving accounts industry, kind of unprecedented, and it's a very impressive example, I think, of really understanding your target audience and not just like staying on the surface, but really digging deep and really getting insights and really, building this empathy with people and what really drives them. And so I am at the end. I brought it. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Sorry. I didn't want to interrupt you when you were just saying the final words.
Yeah.
You just wanted to lead to the questions, but please finish.
Yes, great. So I'm more or less at the end of my talk. I can give you a little bit of background of where I come from. So some of the projects that I've done a lot of times because of this design thinking background. One of them you can see here. This is the Silent Climate Parade, and this is actually a demonstration. In 2009, there was a call for a global organization of activities for a global climate march or a global climate protest. We in Berlin were a little group, and we thought, yeah, let's do something as well, but we don't really want to protest in a way that the generations before us have protested. Like, we live in Berlin, where we have 4,000 demonstrations every year. That's more than 10 a day. Nobody really cares about your demonstration in Berlin. Like, they've pretty much seen it all. And so we started thinking, like, how would a demonstration look like that I would actually enjoy, that, like someone standing on the side of the street, even if they're not really interested at all in the topic, they would at least kind of feel like, okay, these kids, these people are doing a good job, and actually I support whatever they stand for. And what we came up was the Silent Climate Parade. So this is a demonstration where we have a silent disco. So everyone gets an earphone, a wireless headphone, and then we put DJs on electric cars, and the DJs are sending out a signal to all the headphones, and you can only hear the music if you're if you have a headphone. Otherwise, it's quiet. And because we're a demonstration and we're on the street, we're blocking off the traffic, so it already gets quieter. And then we don't have any motorized vehicles except for electric motors. So we create a silent space in the city, and most of the time the people are, or at least in the first years, the reaction was like, what the hell? What are you? Are you guys crazy? Why are you dancing? I don't hear any music. Or are you kind of some kind of weird artist group or whatever? And what it made people do was actually take the flyers that we were distributing. And I don't know how many of you had a student job of trying to distribute flyers, but it's not an easy job. Like, you will get maybe one flyer and maybe 10 people walking by. And pretty much everyone that saw us wanted a flyer. And on that flyer, of course, there was further information about what we're doing. And we're including everyone, different kinds of generations, and we really tried to make it as colorful as possible, bringing in all kinds of organizations that would support us, that kind of shared our vision. We didn't really say, okay, we're limited to, I don't know, a few partners that are going to pay us money. The financial side all worked out as well for us because we always had a lot of support from the people who actually came. But what we really focused on is making this interaction, making this experience something that people will not forget. On the one hand, the people that are part of the march, and they create kind of these new like bonds with people, even though everyone has headphones on, and you would think like, well, it's actually just an individualistic thing. No, actually, it really creates a discussion. You can actually talk with people who are on the side of the road because you don't have to yell over music, and it doesn't seem so aggressive. It's just a different way of bringing your message across. And I think if people yell at me in the street, like, I'm not really going to listen to them or take them serious or whatever. But something like us, we have a lot of people who join in spontaneously. I think my favorite memory was one year when like there was two guys, they were maybe like 16, and they just joined the crowd and danced and didn't even get a headphone. I was like, what's wrong? Like, you don't even hear any music. And they're like, no, we just like the atmosphere. Like we're into it. So this is one of the things that I did. Another thing that I was a part of was,
we have 10 minutes left, so if we want to take any questions, maybe this.
Oh wow, 10 minutes. All right. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought we had till 7:30.
Oh, sorry. We had communicated 7:15. So maybe let's just move into first round of questions, and if people want to stay on and learn a little bit more, then we can do that as well. So I just want to open up the discussion and encourage everyone to ask you also about their projects and how they could implement the techniques as you've described in the kind of projects that our members are doing right now. So I'm opening the floor to you. You can see the people, right? Because I
can see most of them. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Not everyone at once, please.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, you were introducing a lot of techniques where you were in a team or like a project team, but are there also techniques that you can use when you're alone? I mean, of course, it's not the ideal situation, but I think, like for me, many times, for example, where I'm working now, I have many ideas that I want to kind of like structure and start by myself. And then when I'm at a certain stage, I can bring it into my team because it's not a priority. And also, since I'm working in a co-working space and we have a lot of freelancers here, and they're always complaining like that they don't have people to interact, and sometimes they're missing creativity because they're kind of alone. I was wondering if there's also like design thinking ideas that you have that you can apply without having a team.
Yes. So it's much more difficult without a team, obviously. I mean, you said it yourself, but there are some things I think that you can do kind of on your own. And I think, especially when it comes to that first part, to the understanding part, I think you can really do a lot of that observational things and a lot of the building personas and thinking about what is the problem. I think you can do that also on your own. I think it's not quite as much fun on the one hand, and also you'll have to figure out a way of how not to get lost kind of in your track of thoughts, and maybe figure out a way of like being able to add that to a conversation with your friends at the bar, or like somewhere else outside where you can maybe get a little bit of like easy input on this, to get like a quick reality check from other people. I think that is one important part. And then I think another important part is also to, like, what I do is to leave something then kind of marinate a little bit, where I have it at the back of my head. It's kind of there, but that I don't constantly stress over finishing this part, but then approaching it maybe on a different day with a different mindset, with a different trigger or a different priming that I've had, because I don't know, I've had different interactions in the morning, or I'm just in a different space. So this, I think, helps a little bit to bring together, or to imitate this idea of different kind of backgrounds and ideas and viewpoints, like kind of clashing. When you have freelancers like that, I think that's like wonderful. If you're in a co-working space, like you can take a lunch hour, you know, everyone can bring like some sandwich, take an hour, and then, I don't know, let's say there's 3 people, you take 20 minutes brainstorming on everyone's issue.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, and oftentimes I think this hour, even though every one person will have spent 40 minutes thinking about someone else's project, I think a lot of times it will be also useful, you know, for them, on the one hand, to first of all get out of where they are right now in their head, which might be a little stuck, which might be a little bit like just thinking one-dimensional or one-directional, and to think about something else for 20 minutes can, I think, help a lot when you're in a position like that where you can't continue. I think you can do also the ideation even, you know. I mean, you obviously cannot moderate and answer the questions at the same time, but I do think that kind of collecting your thoughts and really saying, okay, I'm taking now 20 minutes to really put down everything on a Post-it and, you know, like stick it on a wall. And I'm really not going to care about stupid answers or however these answers make you look, but really to focus on actually getting as many out there as possible. So I think the time structuring for like that you can use, I think is something you can do on your own. Mm-hmm. But yes, like obviously it will always, the best version is always in a team, but if you're alone, I don't think that these are techniques that you shouldn't use because you don't have a team.
Yeah, of course. I just feel sometimes I want to like structure my ideas and my thoughts first, and then when I get to a certain point, I can bring it in the team, because when it's not ready yet, I don't want to annoy them, or like not annoy, of course, but everyone has their priorities, and then I feel sometimes it's harder to like really sit down and structure it when you have like a lot of things on your mind.
And for sure, there are parts of the design thinking process where you should be alone, where you need to kind of go out, you know, like in the brainstorming time, like phase, sometimes you just want everyone to take 10 minutes and kind of write down what they're thinking without constantly being interrupted by someone else. Or you might need to like really work on that persona to really understand them more deeply, and that's not a group task where everyone gets together, but you're trying to, you know, like work something out a little bit and then come back to the group. So yes, that is part of the process. But what I would probably encourage you to do, like, is to get those people in the team at least on board with kind of the approach that you're taking, and with the realization that if you're trying to build something new, that it's a huge challenge, and some of these techniques can really help with thinking in these different new ways.
Are there other questions on the floor? I would have one, but I want you to speak up. Okay, I would like to kind of like bring it closer to the oikos work, because most of what our members do is work at university projects. You know, everything is kind of linked to this greater entity of the university, may it be in teaching or research, or just in like practical things. So for example, when you think about making the cafeteria greener or more sustainable or more organic, you have these different stakeholders in the process. You have to talk to the university and the people at the cafeteria and all their suppliers, and then in the end, your user will be the student. So also the student will have to maybe pay a higher price or have this attitude towards food that they would be willing to buy the organic menus. Just as an example, you have this this array of stakeholders, and how do you add this kind of complexity into the framework of design thinking, where you first kind of are supposed to think about the user, and then only in later steps, I guess, about the other stakeholders.
Well, the question is really, what in the process are you designing? Like, are you kind of designing the cheaper food or the more organic food that is just going to then be kind of sold to the students, and you want to increase like how many students buy that? Or are you looking to also design solutions that would work for everyone kind of in the process? And I think that, for me, gets to this level of like fundamentally understanding what is really the challenge here, and understanding like what are the needs of the different actors. And I don't think that you should, in this case, kind of prioritize any one over the other, because in this case, like, you're trying to get buy-in from everyone, and in a way, the user in the end of that system is not only the one that will kind of buy your product, but the user could also be the people who have to now change the way they did things from before, and might need to learn new skills, or might just like do things differently or organize processes differently. And I would encourage very strongly to also think about, you know, these people in the same way, in the same like way of, well, understanding what are their needs, what are their kind of constraints, and how can the solution actually be better for everyone? And if that's not possible, how can it be as close to that ideal as possible? Because then I think once you have like the at least the critical kind of stakeholders with you on board, then you're really designing a solution for, you know, people and not on top of them. So I would probably get them involved in the process. You know, like really putting together, I don't know, someone who cleans the dishes, someone who does the menu, someone who does all the cooking, someone who makes sure everything looks nice in the cafeteria. Get them all together and actually, you know, see how they would imagine, or what are the challenges that they are dealing with. And I think
so you would include the stakeholders in the ideation process already, or sorry, not in the ideation, the understanding process.
Yeah, I would include them even like especially in the ideation process as well. Like, I mean, if they are there.
Which one of the two?
Sorry? I didn't understand the question.
So I was just delayed. I was just delayed. Keep going, sorry.
Okay. So yes, please have them as part of the understand part, because these are the people that you want to understand, but then you can involve them in through the whole process. There's actually two different philosophies in the design world. On the one hand, there is this idea of, like, imagine you're like trying to help some village in Africa. Let's be super stereotypical. Like, there's two philosophies. On the one hand, one design philosophy would say, well, we should actually go there. We should teach them design principles because they understand the problem at such a different and fundamental level that we, with even 1 or 2 years spending in the village, could never understand. So what we should do is give them the tools and let them design the solutions. And there's a second philosophy that says, actually, because they are so engaged in this world, they cannot see beyond it. So it would take someone like an outsider, like a designer, to go there, spend 1 or 2 years with them, and then design solutions for them, but from much more a bird's eye view. It's a big kind of divide, and I don't know exactly where I stand. I think a bit of both is really true. Maybe it depends on the situation, but in this case, I would really use that and say, well, if you're trying to design a solution for the kitchen, I would, as much as possible, include them in the process. That could mean that you actually teach them the design techniques, or it means that you involve them in like that process that you're that you're doing, and to get their feedback. And I think, apart from this whole value that it can add to your thinking process, I think just the buy-in from people who are asked about their opinions about like which direction you want to go makes everything so much easier. And it's just such a powerful tool of you know, having fans of what you're trying to do from the first moment on. Because a lot of times, you know, like people will, yeah, have a lot of experiences of, I don't know, young or new people coming in and saying like, I want to do everything differently and I have all the solutions and everything, and they've been maybe doing that job for 10 years and nobody's ever listened to them. So I think, you know, changing this is a really good step for actually making a solution that then will make everyone happy, especially because a lot of times the solution working depends on the people who are trying to implement it. So.
Thank you so much for answering the question. And we are actually at the end of our time, which is a real pity. And I hope, I mean, if there's a last question, maybe someone just speak up. Otherwise, Daniel, I would thank you very much for having taken the time to talk to us. And we will be in touch. And I want to give you the final words because you also have your Twitter handle here and your email address about how to know more about what you do and how you do it.
Yes. So thank you very much for joining. I hope it could add some value to you and wherever you are in your project. If you have any questions, so first of all, I'm going to send the slides to Adrian so he can disseminate them. And the second part is, well, you have my contact details here. If you are interested in anything, if you have questions, just send me an email and I'll try as best as possible to answer them.